If these conferences are so important, Dad, why does this check smell like fresh toner and failure? Petra asked, holding the paper above the dispensary counter while the sharp scent of antiseptic and cough syrup still hung in the air. Edmund Hale looked up from snapping shut his worn leather travel case. For 1 second, just one, the calm left his face. Then it came back the way it always did, smooth, practiced, almost gentle. It bounced because the supplier ran it too early, he said. That's all. You know how these things go. In town, people trusted Edmund the way they trusted clocks, rain forecasts, and the pharmacy light in the window. He had that kind of voice. Low, steady, never rushed. He remembered which older customers needed child-proof caps and which ones couldn't open them. He could explain a dose without making anyone feel foolish. And every few weeks, he left for what he called pharmaceutical conferences, coming home with pressed shirts, hotel soap, and that same tired smile. Petra had never doubted him. Why would she? She kept the shop's ledgers, balanced the till, paid the utility bill, and ordered stock between helping customers find reading glasses and cough drops. Their life was ordinary in the way honest work often is. Shelves to dust, receipts to file, capsules to count. The soft buzz of the cooler in back, the bell over the door. Her father on the road, then home again. But lately, small things had started catching at her like a loose thread on a sweater. A missing box here, a delayed invoice there. A supplier too polite on the phone. Nothing dramatic, just wrong enough to stay with her. Edmund picked up his case. I'll be back before the weekend, he said. After he left, Petra opened the register to close out the day and found the drawer short by an amount too exact to be an accident. If you want to stay with this story, like the video and subscribe. That shortage stayed with Petra all night. The amount wasn't huge. It was the kind of number that sat in the mind like a stone in a shoe. Small, exact, impossible to ignore. The next morning, the pharmacy smelled of paper cartons, hand soap, and the bitter coffee she forgot to finish. She unlocked the front door, switched on the lights, and tried to move through the usual routine, as if nothing had shifted. Count the float, check the fridge log, sign for deliveries, smile at regulars. But once doubt enters a place, it changes the sound of everything. Even the bell over the door seemed sharper. By noon, another small thing arrived. A supplier called about the check Edmund had brushed off the night before. The woman on the line was polite, almost too polite. We can hold the order until payment clears, she said. Petra stared at the shelves where cold medicine should have been restocked by Friday. Hold it? Petra repeated. Since when do you hold our orders? There was a pause, then a careful answer. Since this is the second issue in a month. Petra wrote that down on a sticky note and pressed it into the edge of the register. Later, while she was at the dispensary counter sorting invoices, the front door opened and a man she didn't recognize stepped in. He had rain on his coat and a face that looked used to waiting in places where no one offered chairs. He glanced once around the shop, then asked, "Mr. Hale in?" Petra looked up. "He's away." The man nodded slowly, like that confirmed something. "Tell him Martin stopped by." "About what?" He hesitated, eyes dropping to the stack of statements in her hand. "He'll know." And then he left, but not before Petra noticed the name he had written on the pad by the phone. Not Edmund. Mr. Hale. As if this wasn't a pharmacy at all, but a debt already looking for its owner. After that, Petra stopped telling herself she was imagining things. She did what careful people do when worry hardens into duty. She began to check, quietly, without accusations. After closing, when the last customer had gone and the floor still smelled faintly of wet coats and menthol, she sat in the little office behind the shelves with a pencil, a calculator, and the shop's ledgers spread open under the yellow desk lamp. At first, it was only dates. Edmund's trips marked in her neat handwriting on the wall calendar. Cash withdrawals from the business account. A supplier payment that should have cleared and didn't. Then inventory sheets. Then fuel receipts. The more she looked, the less random it felt. Every conference seemed to begin the same way. Money out the day before, vague paperwork after, and no real sign that any professional event had happened at all. When Edmund called that evening from the road, his voice was smooth as ever. "Everything all right there?" Petra looked at the bank statement under her hand. "Fine," she said. He asked if a shipment had come in. She answered yes. He asked whether Mrs. Dalton had picked up her prescription. Petra said she had. It was almost unbearable, that ordinary conversation. The small kindnesses of business going on over something that no longer felt ordinary at all. The next morning, she went through his travel drawer while he was away. Hotel soap, receipts, cufflinks, mints, and then, tucked into the side pocket of his shaving case, a valet slip on thick cream paper. No conference center, no hotel name she recognized, just a private club 2 towns over. Petra read the address twice, her thumb resting against the stiff cardstock, and for a long moment she could hear nothing but the pharmacy cooler humming in the back. Then she folded the slip into her wallet and decided that this time, when Edmund left, she would follow him. The morning Edmund left again, Petra moved through the pharmacy as if it were any other day. She signed for a delivery, wiped a fingerprint from the glass by the front shelves, and watched him kiss the air near her cheek on his way out with that same travel case in his hand. 3 days, he said. Conference, then straight back. Petra nodded, because if she had spoken too much, her voice might have shown something. The bell over the door gave its soft little ring, and then he was gone. She waited 10 minutes before locking up the office, telling the technician she had errands to run, and slipping into her neighbor's old sedan. The seat smelled faintly of dog hair and cold vinyl. Petra kept 2 car lengths behind Edmund all the way past the edge of town, then farther, past the garden center, past the diner with the flickering sign, on to roads he had never once described when he came home talking about pharmacy training and supplier meetings. That was what hurt in a strange way. Not only the lie, but the calm detail of it. The way he had built a routine around being believed. By late afternoon, he turned off onto a narrower street lined with old brick buildings and parked behind a place with tinted windows. No banners, no conference signs, no hotel entrance, just a brass plaque beside a side door, polished enough to catch the pale light. Petra stayed in the car at first, fingers tight around the steering wheel. Men in pressed shirts went in one by one. No one carried folders, no one wore name tags. One man handed something thick and white, an envelope maybe, to the doorman before being let inside. Then Edmund stepped out, straightened his jacket, and disappeared through that same door. Petra had just opened her own car door when a voice beside her said, very quietly, "You must be his daughter." Petra turned so fast her heel caught on the edge of the car mat. The man standing there was the same one who had come into the pharmacy asking for Mr. Hale. Up close, he looked older than she had first thought, with a damp collar, pale lashes, and the kind of patient expression people wear when they deal in bad news for a living. He kept his hands visible, almost politely so. "I'm not here to cause a scene," he said. "But if you're his daughter, you should know he's run out of room." Petra stared at him. Beyond his shoulder, the brass plaque beside the side door gave nothing away. Inside, her father was somewhere behind those dark windows while men arrived with envelopes and quiet faces. "What room?" she asked. The man glanced toward the building, then back at her. "Debt room, time room, pick one." He gave a tired little breath. "Your father borrowed from people who don't send reminders on postcards." There are moments when the truth does not arrive all at once. It comes like cold rain through a seam you didn't know was open. Petra felt it then. Not fully, not yet, but enough to make her fingers go numb around her keys. He reached into his coat pocket and took out a business card. Just a name, Martin Voss, and a phone number. On the back, written in blue ink, were 5 words. Blue file, office safe, tonight. If you care about the pharmacy, he said, look before he gets home and starts talking. Petra looked at the card, then at the building again. Her father had not stepped back out. The parking lot smelled of wet pavement and cigarette smoke. Somewhere inside, a burst of laughter rose and vanished. When she finally found her voice, it came out thin. Why are you telling me this? Martin held her gaze for one long second. Because the foreclosure notice hasn't been filed yet. Petra drove back in near dark with Martin's card on the passenger seat and her heart beat so loud it seemed to fill the car. By the time she unlocked the pharmacy, the street outside was quiet. The front window reflected the dim lamps across the road, and inside the place smelled the way it always did after hours. Dust, cardboard, rubbing alcohol, and the faint sweetness of cough syrup. It should have felt familiar, safe. Instead, every shelf looked as if it had been standing on borrowed ground without her knowing. She went straight to the office. The safe sat where it always had, low in the cabinet behind old tax folders and expired warranty papers. Edmund had never hidden it from her. That was the bitter thing. He had trusted her to count, to file, to keep the shop's ledgers clean, while keeping one whole life of numbers out of reach. Petra keyed in the code with stiff fingers, opened the door, and found the blue file exactly where Martin said it would be. Inside were copies first, then originals. A refinanced business note, a second mortgage on the family home, signature pages with Edmund's careful handwriting, payment schedules, missed deadlines, added fees. One page stamped in red, another marked urgent review. And then the word that made her stop breathing for a second. Remortgaged. The house too, along with the shop. Petra sat down hard in Edmund's chair and kept turning pages because sometimes the worst thing is not one lie, but how many rooms it has spread through before anyone opens the door. Near the back of the file, she found a letter clipped to a packet of legal forms. It was not yet the final seizure order, but it was close enough. And at the bottom, in black type, was a deadline only days away. Just as she heard Edmund's key turn in the front door. Petra closed the file just as Edmund stepped through the front. The bell gave its soft chime, the same one she had heard her whole life, and for a strange second it made everything feel smaller. The pharmacy, the office, the man carrying his coat over one arm as if he had come back from something respectable. He smiled when he saw the light on in back. "You're still here?" he asked. "I told you not to wait up." She did not answer that. She walked out of the office with the papers in her hands and set them on the counter between the cough drops and the card reader. Edmund saw the top page, then the next, and his face changed the way milk changes when it turns. Not all at once, but enough that you know it can't be fixed. "Where did you get those?" he said quietly. "In your safe?" He looked past her toward the office door, then back at the documents. "Petra, listen to me." "No," she said, and her voice surprised even her. It was steady. "You listen to me. The house? The pharmacy? You remortgaged both of them?" Edmund set his coat down very carefully. That was the first sign that the truth had weight in him too. "I was going to put it right." "With what?" Petra asked. "Another trip?" He dragged a hand over his mouth. "It started small. I had a bad run, then I thought I could recover it. I just needed time." There it was. No conference, no bad bookkeeping, No misunderstanding. A room full of cards and borrowed money had been sitting behind every polite lie he brought home. Petra felt anger rise, but underneath it was something worse. The cold shock of realizing he had let her keep the books while hiding the blade over her head. "How many days?" she asked. Edmund looked at the page she had turned face up, and when he answered, he barely breathed the words. "Until they move on the pharmacy. 4." The rest of that night did not turn into shouting. That was the strange part. Edmund sat on the stool by the register with both hands locked together, and Petra stood behind the dispensary counter with the papers spread in front of her like something clinical, something to be assessed before it got worse. He tried to explain runs of bad luck, one more chance, money that had almost come back. She heard him, but the words had lost their power. Once a lie is opened up, even its softest version sounds worn out. By morning, she had made her decision. Edmund offered to go with her. "I can talk to them," he said. "No," Petra answered, already buttoning her coat. "You've done enough talking. If you're listening tonight, tell me where you're listening from. And if you've ever found out too late that someone everybody trusted had been quietly tearing holes in the ground beneath the family, you'll understand this next part better than most." The lender's office was above a shuttered storefront that smelled of old carpet and stale heat. Martin Voss met her there. Not unfriendly, not warm either. Petra laid out the papers and told him plainly that the pharmacy could not be allowed to close. "People depend on that place," she said. "You auction it off and this town loses more than a business." Martin studied her for a moment. "Your father never said that sentence once." That landed harder than she expected. He told her the terms were ugly, but there was one path left. If Petra assumed operational control, took responsibility for the debt, and produced a first payment within days, he could delay action. Not forgive it, delay it. Then he slid a form across the desk and tapped a line near the bottom. To do that, he said, you'll need to lock Edmund out of the till. Starting today. By the time Petra got back, the afternoon light had gone flat against the front windows. She stood in the office for a moment with the new papers in her hand, listening to the familiar sounds of the place she was now trying to save from her own father. The cooler humming, a pill tray clicking somewhere out front, the soft scrape of a customer's cane on the floor. Then she opened the drawer where the spare register keys were kept and removed Edmund's set. When he came in from the stockroom, she placed them on the desk between them. He saw the keys first, then her. "You can't be serious." "I am," Petra said. "As of today, I handled the till, the accounts, and every withdrawal. You do not touch the register again." The hurt that crossed his face was real. So was the anger under it. "You're treating me like a criminal." She held his gaze. "No, I'm treating you like a man who signed away the pharmacy and didn't tell me." Some betrayals do not shatter in one loud moment. They settle into the room and change where everyone stands. Edmund moved as if he wanted to argue, then stopped. Maybe because he knew the paperwork was already in motion. Maybe because he had run out of explanations that sounded like truth. Petra spent the rest of the day calling suppliers, asking for smaller shipments, extended terms, anything that would keep the shelves from looking thin. She skipped lunch, rewrote the week's cash plan, and counted the drawer twice before closing. Every bottle, every receipt, every order slip now felt tied to that first payment Martin had demanded. Late that evening, after Edmund had gone upstairs without another word, Petra checked the bank activity one more time. There it was, a cash withdrawal made that morning, after their confrontation, after the papers, after everything. and the amount was just large enough to make her understand he had still tried to take one last piece with him. That withdrawal ended whatever softness Petra still had left for the moment. She did not march upstairs. She did not slam a door. She sat alone in the office with the screen glow on her face and wrote down the amount on the back of an invoice, the same way she had been writing down every small wound for weeks now. Outside, the street had gone quiet. Inside, the pharmacy smelled of dust, lemon cleaner, and the stale heat of old wiring. It was the smell of a place that had to open again in the morning, no matter what the people inside it had done. At dawn, she called Martin. He listened without surprise. "Then you tighten it today," he said. "No shared access, no discretionary cash. If he objects, let him object after the first payment is made." That first payment became Petra's whole horizon. She sold a piece of jewelry her mother had left her. She emptied her own savings account, the one meant for a different life someday, maybe a larger apartment, maybe time away, maybe just breathing room. She asked 2 vendors whether partial advance orders could be delayed without public embarrassment. Then she stood at the sink in the break room, cold water running over her wrists, and let herself feel the weight of it for exactly 30 seconds before drying her hands and going back to work. Edmund came down late, washed, dressed, trying to look as though routine could still protect him. "Did you call them?" he asked. "I did." "And?" Petra kept counting blister packs into a tray. "You're off the accounts, the register. Everything." He went pale. "Petra, please, don't do this before staff." She looked up then. "You did it before the whole town. They just don't know it yet." He had no answer to that. By late afternoon, the first payment was nearly assembled. When the card terminal receipt printed, and Petra saw a notice from the bank waiting in the queue, a formal review of the property securing the business loan. That review notice did not end them, but it did mark the beginning of a different life. Martin managed to hold the line once Petra wired the first payment, and the bank's formal review became one more paper to answer, one more office to call, one more person to convince that the pharmacy still had a future if the right hands were on it. From then on, her days changed shape. She opened earlier, she stayed later, she checked every invoice herself, counted stock at closing, and kept coffee going in the back room until it tasted burnt by noon. Lean months have a sound to them. In that shop, it was the printer spitting out smaller orders, the cooler kicking on at odd hours, the soft scratch of Petra's pen as she rewrote cash plans at the end of each day. She cut waste where no customer would feel it. She changed suppliers. She started refill reminder calls. She tracked what sold, what sat too long, what had to go. Slowly, the place became less dependent on habit and more dependent on discipline. Edmund did not fight forever. Some men collapse loudly, others just thin out in front of you. He stopped reaching for the register because there was nothing left to reach for. A few weeks later, Petra noticed clothes missing from upstairs, then a toothbrush gone from the bathroom cup, then silence where his footsteps used to be. He moved into a rented room on the far side of town without announcement, as if absence itself might spare him the shame of leaving. People began to notice changes at the pharmacy too. Petra protected that, but they noticed her at every station, ordering, advising, fixing insurance glitches, lifting boxes behind the counter. One older customer said, "Your father used to do that." Petra smiled and answered, "Now I do." Then, just when the accounts had started to breathe a little, she came in one morning to find the medicine fridge warm. The air inside the fridge had the wrong feel to it. Just cool enough to fool someone who didn't know better. Petra knew better the second she touched the shelf and looked at the temperature display. Her stomach dropped. She was already moving before the fear had time to become panic. Pulling stock lists, checking lot numbers, calling the technician, hauling insulated bins from the back room with hands that had learned not to shake until later. That morning became a blur of cold packs, clipboards, ringing phones, and the metallic smell of the unit's open panels, while the repairman crouched with the flashlight and said the words she had no room to hear. Compressors gone. Some losses arrive like punishment. This one arrived like a test. Petra borrowed temporary storage from a nearby clinic, documented every item for partial reimbursement, and called customers whose medications might be delayed before they had the chance to show up and worry at the counter. She did not let the town see shelves in disarray if she could help it. She did not let one failing machine undo years of holding the line. And something changed after that. She stopped running the pharmacy the old way simply because the old way was familiar. She added temperature alerts, tightened inventory tracking even more, set up refill sinks for patients who were always forgetting, built small routines that saved minutes, and minutes that saved money. Over time, people no longer said, "I'm headed to Edmund's place." They said, without thinking, "I need to stop by Petra's." Years passed that way, lean, disciplined, unsentimental. Then, one winter evening, with the new fridge humming steadily behind her and the monthly numbers spread out in front of her, Petra saw it there in black ink. One final payment left. And before she could sit with that, her phone lit up with a message from Edmund. "Can we meet? I need to ask you something." Petra did not answer Edmund's message right away. She finished closing first, counted the drawer, checked the fridge log, initialed the day's insurance claims. There was something almost sacred now in those last small tasks, the ones nobody applauded and nobody saw. Years earlier, she had kept numbers because it was part of helping her father. Now she kept them because they had become the quiet beams holding the whole place up. She agreed to meet him the next evening in a small coffee shop 2 streets over from the pharmacy. When Edmund walked in, Petra noticed first how light he seemed, as if life had been taking pieces off him one by one. His coat was clean but worn at the cuffs. His hands, once so steady over pill bottles and labels, moved with a kind of hesitation now. He sat down, looked at her, and for a moment, neither of them reached for the menu. "I heard you're almost done," he said at last. Petra folded her hands around the warm mug. "One payment." He nodded, eyes dropping to the table. "You did what I should have done." There are apologies that come too late to mend trust, but still arrive carrying the weight of truth. Petra could hear that weight in him now, just enough to make silence feel fuller. Then he said what he had really come to say. "When it's cleared," Edmund asked quietly, "would you consider putting my name back on the pharmacy?" Petra looked at him for a long second. Outside, headlights slid across the window glass. Inside, the smell of roasted coffee and steam hung between them. He did not seem proud anymore. He seemed hopeful, in the way of people who mistake regret for restoration. She did not answer at once. She let him sit with the question he had brought. And the next morning, before she gave him any reply at all, Petra walked into the pharmacy and found an envelope on the dispensary counter with the final payoff statement inside. The envelope had been slid under the office door before opening. Petra stood there with her coat still on, the pharmacy dark except for the pale strip of morning light at the front windows, and read the payoff statement once, then again. Final balance due. Release upon receipt. After all those years of smaller orders, skipped comforts, repaired machines, early mornings, and nights spent with aching eyes over the books, the end of it had become a single sheet of paper she could hold in one hand. She paid it before noon. When Edmund came by that evening, she met him in the consultation room instead of the office. It was cleaner that way. 2 chairs, a glass of water, no old symbols between them. He looked from her face to the receipt on the table and understood before she spoke. "It's done," Petra said. His eyes filled, but he kept himself still. "Then I'll ask you once." She knew what was coming. "No," Petra said gently, before he could shape the words again. "A sign is not a history, and it is not an apology." He looked down at his hands. For the first time, he did not argue. He only nodded, the way people do when truth has finally stopped negotiating with them. A week later, the pharmacy reopened after a modest refresh. New lighting, a steadier fridge system, fresh paint, nothing flashy, just care made visible. On the first busy morning, the bell above the door rang, and Edmund stepped in with a prescription folded in his coat pocket. He took a number. He waited. And when his turn came, Petra called his name the same way she called everyone else's, evenly, professionally, without anger and without pretense. Some things are not restored by being handed back. They are replaced by steadier hands, one receipt, one shelf, one open door at a time. At sunset, after the last customer left, Petra turned off the consultation room light and paused beside the softly humming fridge, listening to a place that no longer sounded afraid. If this story stayed with you, leave the name of your town or city in the comments, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that quiet work can outlast a very loud mistake.